My name is Katie Tomberlin, and I'm from Carteret County. This is Community Rising, Shoreside's environmental stories, broadcasting from the Working Narrative Studio. Coming up next are stories from coastal North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Kayla Gilliams, and I'm a reporter for Community Rising. North Carolina is predicted to face a rough hurricane season this year, with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecasting a season with more hurricanes than average. With increased hurricanes comes increased evacuations, and the state hopes to streamline these with their newly developed Know Your Zone initiative. In this episode, Katie Webster, the Assistant Director of Planning for North Carolina Emergency Management, talks about that initiative and how the state hopes to use it to better communicate their evacuation orders.
Through our work seeing the large storms that were impacting North Carolina at the time and other states, such as Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey, we realized that we did not have a great way to communicate vulnerability or evacuation orders. And so North Carolina was the only hurricane-prone state that did not have any type of zone program. And so in June of this year, we officially launched the Know Your Zone program for 20 coastal counties that are impacted by either storm surge, inland flooding, or both. The Know Your Zone initiative is ultimately a tiered evacuation system that highlights areas that are most vulnerable to impacts from hurricanes, tropical storms, and other hazards. The Know Your Zone program is led by North Carolina Emergency Management, but we see ourselves as a mouthpiece for the counties. The evacuations in North Carolina remain at the county level, although our governor does have the option to call evacuations. But the Know Your Zone initiative is a communication tool that helps to communicate that vulnerability if an evacuation order is issued. So it was up to the county to determine how they evacuate and then translating that into zones. Because before we had evacuation zones, we relied solely on everyone's ability to communicate and describe a geographic area. For example, anywhere east of Highway 17 or low-lying areas and those prone to flooding. But with zones, you can say Zone A and follow with the description. But it's much easier to identify a pre-designated polygon or area on a map instead of describing a geographic area using landmark boundaries. We think it's really going to increase our ability to get that message out and to streamline the evacuation process in a way that people can understand what areas are being evacuated by just a quick reference to our website and know if they're in a vulnerable area, or especially not only those living there, but also visitors. And each county has a different number of zones depending on their geography, their census data, the impact and how water affects their county. At most, we have 5 zones, zone A, B, C, D, and E. Some counties have as few as 1 zone. When they were creating the zones, they used a number of factors to determine where zones would align. A lot of it is the historical knowledge of where they know specific areas are impacted in a storm based off recent ones, whether it be from storm surge or flooding. And so in some counties, the storm surge arrives either before or during a storm, but in some areas you have heavy rainfall that can actually flood an area after the storm has passed. So those factors play into it as well, especially into the tiered approach and making sure that if you have a zone, that it is flexible, meaning if a county needed to call only Zone A, then they could call only Zone A. And that's actually happening right now with the current tropical system, is that counties can call just Zone A, for example, the Barrier Islands. We want Know Your Zone to be a holistic approach in each county. We want them to consider numerous factors so that most of all, the program can work for them in any type of event, since each storm is different, whether it be the angle of approach or whether it be the hazards. There are differences in how the zones were created. Pitt and Lenoir County were based largely off of river flooding, whereas Brunswick and New Hanover County rely a lot heavier on the surge information to create those zones. And some differences between all of the counties in the Know Your Zone program is their elevation and the population. And those are key things that play into how the county chooses to evacuate. For example, New Hanover County has a much bigger population than some of our counties in the north. And so they want to make sure that their zones are much tighter so that they don't over-evacuate. Evacuation zones can really help us in a COVID-19 environment. And that is because it could help us limit over-evacuation, because of course that has implications on the amount of sheltering that we may need. It can help us in that way in a COVID environment, is that it's important in your disaster kit to have things like hand sanitizer and wipes and a face covering in your disaster kit in case you had to go to a shelter, because ultimately we do not want people to be fearful to take action, whether it be through evacuating or any type of preparedness with the storm. We do not want them to be fearful to do that in a COVID environment, because we want them to act on the greatest threat right now, and that very well could be impacts from a tropical system.
You've been listening to Community Rising, Shoreside's Environmental Stories. This podcast is a special project of Shoresides and Working Narratives. Do you have a story from our coast that you would like to share? Contact us at info@shoresides.org. Thank you for listening.